r/Nosleep. Posted by u/BornBeach. Check out author's subreddit. r/Tales-from-the-Cryptid. Nightmare_wood.text. When I was a kid, I lived next to a 100-acre wood. No, not that 100-acre wood. This one didn't have talking Pooh Bears or depressed donkeys, nor did it have spunky tigers or nervous piglets. It might have had a wise owl, but that might also have just been a regular owl that looked wise. Either way, my name's David Holan, not Christopher Robin. My 100-acre wood might not have been splendiferous or as carefree as Winnie the Pooh's, but it was, in my opinion, much more interesting. See, in the place of all those lovely details it had features of its own. For instance, it had a river, long and loud, and it had towering trees. The kind of trees so vast and all-encompassing, that if you walked deep enough they blocked out the sun itself. I called it Nightmare Wood, because it gave me nightmares, but everybody else called it Goffin Forest. It had been in the family as long I can remember, and longer still. My great-grandfather purchased it in the early 1900s and built a farm on the property. There were always talks about clear-cutting the wood for some extra farmable land, but for one reason or another, those talks always fell through. I'd spent the last 10 years of my life doing my best to forget about Nightmare Wood. I moved states, picked up a job at a factory, and deleted every piece of social media I had. The truth was, I didn't want any reminders of my old life. And for a while, I thought I'd actually escaped it. Of course, that's not really how these stories go, is it? Like I said, my name's David. I'm not an only child, but I wish I was. Desperately some days, but I'm not. I've got 2 sisters, the second more terrible than the first. Then I've got a brother. Or at least, the approximation of one. James mostly keeps to himself, rarely speaks, and when he does it's so quiet you probably can't hear him anyway. Growing up, he spent a lot of time in Nightmare Wood. It was the one place he could be certain the rest of the family wouldn't bother him. After all, nobody wanted to take any Sunday hikes through the forest. There was nothing to see, not really. Just horrible things to feel. James was the one who showed me there was beauty in the wood. He did it when we were young, by introducing me to the monsters that dwelled in the trees. I'm not talking about wolves or spiders, or centipedes or ravens. I'm talking about monsters. At first, they were pleasant, even if they didn't look it. The vampire, for instance, had long fangs and bloodshot eyes. Her mouth seemed to have a near-constant trail of blood leaking from her lips, but she was always all smiles and laughs. Her catchphrase was bloody brilliant. Even though she was American and not British. Nice lady. Some of the monsters, though, were not so carefree. Some served as the reason I left that wood, the reason I left my brother and sisters, and my parents behind. They were, in a word, evil. Last week, I got a call from James. He sounded breathless, nervous and not at all like himself. When he spoke, he tripped over his words and they came in near nonsensical tangents. He asked me to come home, saying that the wood was worrying him and that he needed help dealing with it. I told him to leave it be. I said he'd be better off leaving that wood behind him like my sisters and I had, and try to make a life free from its nightmares. He told me he couldn't. He begged me to come home. "David, I need help," he said. "I can't do this alone." "Then find yourself a therapist," I replied. "I'm finished with that place." He said something into the receiver, but it cut off halfway when I hung up the line. It was tough love, but the truth. I wasn't about to destroy the mental health I'd managed to scrounge together in the name of chasing old nightmares with my brother. I felt a little guilty, but I got over it by the next morning and life went on. I clocked in at the factory, clocked out, came home and watched Netflix with an order of skip the dishes. Rinse. Repeat. My life wasn't amazing, but it was a life and the best I had. Yesterday, Mom called me. She told me my brother was dead. She found him 20 paces outside of the wood and couldn't get out much more than that. Instead, she put a detective named Williams on the line who filled in the blanks while she wept in the background. I don't want to get into the details of what the detective told me, but James did not die a peaceful death. He was decapitated and desecrated, his brain matter scooped from the inside of his skull, and his torso was nowhere to be found. According to the detective, the police suspect a cannibalistic ritual may have been taken place. He based this on how they found my brother's head. 2 sticks had been shoved through his eyes and a symbol had been cut into each of his cheeks. I did my best to hold in my vomit. The detective didn't recognize the symbol, but he assured me he'd look into it. "My money," Williams said, "is on a cult." When the detective hung up, I hurled into the toilet for 20 straight minutes. Afterward, I sat curled around the toilet bowl staring into the red-brown puke. My mind reeled. My body trembled. I thought about a lot of things, but mostly I thought about my brother. James and I weren't close, but once upon a time we had been, before we decided to explore the terrible forest, and all of its terrible secrets. Now he was gone. Desecrated. My alarm blared, interrupting my reverie. Beep. 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 I glared through the bathroom doorway at the neon red display, brazenly declaring that it was 9 in the evening and long past time for me to start getting ready for work. I stumbled into my room, still in a daze, and reached over and hurled the black box at the wall. It exploded in a shower of circuitry, but it didn't make me feel any better. James, I mumbled, swallowing. The acidic sting of vomit lined my throat. I'm sorry. I sobbed, wanting to fall to the floor. I wanted to shrink into a ball, close my curtains, retreat into myself and cry until the world faded to black. I wanted to escape this feeling. This regret. This pain. This loss. But I couldn't. The truth was, my alarm clock was right. I did have somewhere I needed to be, but it wasn't the factory. It was Nightmare Wood. Williams suspected somebody murdered my brother in a sick display of ritual cannibalism. I knew better. After all, no humans lived in that forest, just nightmares. The kind that fed on fear, not flesh. James knew that better than anybody. It was why he surrounded himself with the benevolent monsters of the wood. It was the reason he still walked beneath its pitch-black canopy. It was the reason he stayed at home, when my sisters and I moved states, so that somebody could watch over the horror that grew beneath those leaves. No, this wasn't cannibalism. It was a warning. A tripwire. The first of several, probably. Something was announcing itself, and telling my family and the rest of Gotham to get ready. Like I said, James spent a lot of time in that wood. He was the best equipped of any of us to deal with the evils it held. Now he was gone. That left me. I wiped the tears from my eyes and snatched my car keys from the counter. It was time to return to Nightmare Wood. 19 years ago, when I was just a kid, I made a horrible mistake beneath those trees. I traded something that didn't belong to me. Now I had to make things right. My family, and the rest of Gotham depended on it.